Now, usually we talk about our personal speaking confidence, but today we're going to talk about team speaking confidence. And my guest today is Glain Roberts-McCabe. She is the founder and president of the Roundtable, a company that helps leaders navigate change, disruption, and growth by building the mindsets and behaviors that matter the most. I love rhymes in sentences. Thanks for writing that. That was fun to say. Now, Glaine's also a sought after expert in the field of group coaching. She works with executive teams and high potential fast trackers to move from heroic leadership to making a bigger collective impact. Welcome, Glain.
Thank you, Linda. It's so great to be here with you today.
It's really exciting for me too. I love like the taking what I do in one kind of circle of influence, coming from ourselves and thinking of it in a larger circle of impact and influence. So I'm very excited to get into this whole idea about, group dynamics and group confidence. And I want to start off with the common challenges to team confidence. And I just want to put out like my thinking as a jumping off place. I often think of group dynamics, there's often like an imbalance in how much airtime people take up. I think of the people who take up a lot of space and the others who may take up less because they don't want to either compete or they want to balance out all the airtime that other people have taken by not doing it themselves, or maybe they just want to kind of hang back because they're unsure personally. Yeah. What's your take on the challenges to team confidence?
Yeah, it's really it's interesting, right? Because we think of it so on an individual level, we think about what gives us individually confidence, right? And in when you sort of talked about the work we do, this, I think in leadership and in team development work, often we sort of look at the individual first, and then that's where it stops. So I might know my styles, I might know what motivates me, I might know and understand the things that do give me confidence and shake away my own confidence. And we all have biases as individuals. So we all sort of think that everybody sees the world the way we see the world. And isn't this common sense? I love it when I hear a leader say to me, but that's just common sense. And I always think, well, that's common sense to you. And so it's the same with things that give us confidence, right? So I think one of the things that can, I think it starts with individually within the team, where are the biases around what gives us confidence and what doesn't give us confidence? What are the things that we need to understand? And so the person who, maybe is very sensitive to putting out an idea, for example, like maybe there's somebody who, they put out an idea and then it got tromped all over, people just shoot it down really quickly. Then maybe next time they're not going to speak up and they're not going to put out their idea. That's reduced their confidence. If we stop by only looking at each individual, what we're frankly missing is the bigger picture. Because what if, let's say, you have a lot of people on the team, like a dominant group of people on the team are actually they're idea ants, like they can prolificate like ants do, right? Like ants are just everywhere running around. You can stomp on ants and they'll keep coming at you and keep coming back. People who are idea ants do that, right? Whereas if you're the one lone voice who is, I think of like an elephant, it takes an elephant a long time to gestate and have a little baby elephant, right? So if you've been gestating your idea like a little elephant and then you cautiously show it out to this team who are a bunch of ants who are used to stomping on ideas and going, I can come up with a million more ideas. I don't need to, like you don't like that idea? I got another one for you. What's that going to do within the team, right? And how is that going to potentially erode not only the confidence of the individual, but in some ways, if it goes in another direction where that team can no longer rely on that idea energy, or that's not going to get them out of trouble this time around, what starts to happen within that team? So I think one of the things that I think a lot about is just in leadership in general and individually, whether you're a leader or not. I mean, obviously we work primarily with leaders, is how well do you know yourself? How well do you know the things that build your confidence and that diminish your confidence? How well do you know your colleagues. Like if you and I were on a team, would I know what motivated you and what gave you confidence? Or would I assume it's similar to me? And I think what we tend to do is we make assumptions about each other. So I think there's a whole piece that what will kind of support building confidence within a team and helping a team build more their confidence together is starting to unpack some of that. Starting to unpack, where are we individually? Where are we when we work together in a relationship? And where are we when we look at ourselves collectively as a group? And so confidence to me on that level, when I think about it on a what causes confidence issues, it's often that we've got either individuals are feeling like their talents or the things that they know build their esteem, help them feel like they're contributing to the team, are not being met. Or on the other side, where we do get our confidence from, it's not working right now. We're not getting, the wins that we need to get, or we're not. I see it in sales teams all the time. If a sales team's having a hard time, the market's going against them, you'll quickly see a sales team start to spiral, and it becomes like a collective issue for a group. So we have to start to be able to name those things and then understand, okay, then what are the strategies we need to do to minimize that and rebuild our collective confidence, as opposed to just this one-on-one view that we tend to have.
Right. So I hear kind of two things going on here. One is maybe let's say three. So one is the individual, which is kind
Mm,
of where I work because I help people uncover the root causes of their speaking fear so they, as an
yeah,
individual, can contribute more.
yeah,
Then there's the assumptions that we make about other people. And I know from my clients that they often see other people as having it all together when
yes,
oftentimes they do not. So I one of the things I'd like to go into in a moment is like, how do we build that understanding of one another
mm,
in conversation or in groups or
mhm,
whatever? Like, how does that come out? I mean, I
yeah,
have maybe that's part of the kind of training that we can do in teams. And
yeah,
thirdly, the team versus the market.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it's easy for a team to lose its confidence when they've gone through a series of hits, right? Confidence comes easily when you're on the winning side of the scale. It's and it often, when you're on the winning side of things, it often masks a lot of issues within the team that need to potentially be addressed. But when you're on the other side of that, that's when it can start to really erode a team's, confidence in the collective, confidence individually that people may have, and engagement, commitment. All those things everything starts to get a little bit frayed.
Right. So do you have like a story or an example of the team deflation of confidence in view of, let's say, market forces?
Mm.
And how would you work with that kind of with that team in that time of their journey?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of examples. The one that immediately popped up to mind was my own experience leading my team through COVID.
Mm,
And we had an experience where, there was early indicators before. I always think of that March 27th for some reason in Canada is what sticks in my brain. But 2 weeks leading up to that, we heard about this pandemic, we heard about this thing, and I'm a high optimist. It's one of my strengths, and it's also my liability as a leader. I'm very optimistic, and this is being overblown, right? Don't worry about it. But within the 2 weeks leading up to when we went into lockdown here in Canada, we had clients that were maybe more cautious, being more anticipatory, start to pull back on projects. So we had a few big projects start to cancel. We had people, reserving funds. Then we went into 2 weeks of lockdown. And then it really escalated. And so we were having clients calling me, and I'll always remember walking down the sidewalk, getting a call from one of our largest clients saying, we're laying off, out of 1,500 employees, we're laying off 1,350 of them.
Mm.
And I can remember the feeling as a leader thinking, oh my goodness, I've spent 16 years building my business and overnight it's gone. And for the next 3 months, we had zero revenue coming in. And I have this office, I have staff, I have payroll, I have all these things that I have to deal with. And I think when you are faced as a leader with those kind of market forces, and then this is the challenge of being the leader, right, in these situations, is part of your job is to find your own confidence within yourself to be able to, navigate the team through. And then I do believe you've got to create manageable goals for people. I think people need to feel forward momentum. So when I think about, like, that was certainly what we ended up doing with our team, with, what can we do? Control our controllables, keep the costs down. We did have to lay off a couple of people on our team. People took pay cuts. There was a lot of things that we did to keep the engine going. And I think when I think about teams where I've worked with that situation, that's what happens. But it really does have to start with that leader to begin with, to be able to see within themselves, what do you need to build your own confidence? And so, some of that, and I'm sure you probably share a lot of these strategies with the folks that you work with on an individual level. Who builds your confidence? What are the activities that build your confidence? How do you cultivate a mindset of confidence that you're going to get through this particular time? So I think it's the stabilizing of that I see the leaders that I've worked with on teams kind of really be able to ground themselves quickly in that. Of course, you have to have your pity party and do all the things you do, but get grounded in that. And then it's about really being able to control the controllables. I think that the biggest thing that I see with teams that know how to rebuild confidence is they many times go back to basics, and they really get down to some really clear short-term priorities versus longer ones. They aren't afraid to back away from goals that maybe are unachievable at this time. They know to find the balance between what is critical for right now versus what can we come back to and look at again, and what, frankly, given the situation, we can shelve. So I think, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I think this is the piece that for me helps a team rebuild confidence when you're under that kind of crisis. But it starts with if you're the leader of the team, get yourself centered first, and then control your controllables, especially if you're in a big high crisis, chaotic situation, which I think we all sort of had our experience going through, the pandemic that way. That was a big teachable moment for a lot of leaders and organizations.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that you told yourself as a leader, and maybe you help other leaders tell themselves? Like, what are some of the mindset shifts that you have found most helpful for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest ones is really the practice of celebrating small wins. So I yeah, celebrating small wins is one of the biggest ones to do, because you want to keep your own energy on that forward momentum. So looking for the wins sometimes it's within the hour, within the day, within the week, and celebrating those successes. I'm a very big believer in keeping things on that positive note. I think the other thing that I am also a huge advocate of is this idea of community. You need to have a community around you. So for me, the first thing I did when everything shut down was I reached out to 5 other business owners that were in my space, and I created a peer group, and we met every Friday, and we shared ideas, and we tried different strategies, and we talked about what are you doing that's working for you. And I think that sense of community, leadership can be very isolating. Being at any level can be very isolating. So who do you have in your network, in your community, who knows what you're going through, that you can reach out to? So there was the peer community, and then there was my client community. So, they were closer to knowing where they were seeing it going in their business. And so I got a lot of support, frankly, from clients who said, you know what, we're in this phase right now, but we're going to have to come out of this phase. So don't worry, you're going to be fine. And in fact, we were, after 3 months of really having zero, then all of a sudden we had the strongest year we ever had following that. But I think if I'd been in my own echo chamber, I wouldn't have felt as confident in that. And so I encouraged all of my team to do that too. Keep the dialogue going with the people around you. Let's make sure that we're not drinking our own Kool-Aid to some extent, and ask for help. We asked for a lot of help. We reached out and sought support from both clients, suppliers, landlords, people like that, to really help navigate through the time. So I think this is why I bang the drum about this idea of heroic versus collective. I think we're very conditioned to think that independence is great. You need to be an independent driver. You need to be able to figure this stuff out on your own. This is all on your back. And I think in the North American culture in particular, we really get lauded for that. You got the straight A. You ask most students what they despise the most. It's the group project. We want to get the A on our own terms. And yet the reality of the work world today is that it is just so complex. It is, we were talking about VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous 10 years before COVID. Now that's just accelerated. And so I think, in our organizations, we need to actually start moving this idea of individuals are going to save the world. We're going to hire that right leader. We're going to have that one person who's going to sort it all out. And instead really invest in understanding, how do we tap into the collective wisdom so that we can be stronger together, so that we're all in this together, right?
Mm-hmm. So did you find yourself like giving pep talks to your team?
Oh yeah, constantly. And I do a thing, and I've done this for years. I read the Rockefeller Habits, I think about 25 years ago when I was a young leader. And one of the things that Rockefeller used to do was these stand-up meetings. And so I adopted this idea of the stand-up meeting. And one of the things I do at my stand-up meetings every week, we start every Tuesday, 9:05. You will not be able to get members of my team between 9:05 and 9:15 because we have our stand-up. And we open every stand-up. Every individual opens the stand-up with a highlight from the previous week. And it can be personal, it can be professional. But the reason that I do that is that we're bringing in that positive, optimistic energy. So when it was like a rough week and everything, like sometimes your highlight was, okay, I finished the 10,000 piece jigsaw puzzle that, during lockdown, or my kids didn't cry, for their online class today. That was a big win, right? And what we accelerated, I usually just would do my stand-ups on Tuesdays. When you're in crisis, communication has to go up and you have to keep building on that winning momentum. So I was doing them every day. We were having them every single morning. We were doing check-ins with each other. I think and I think with COVID and with hybrid work, and you're seeing a lot of companies going to mandated back to work and all this in-office stuff. And I'm not here to criticize companies that do make those choices, but what I will say is a lot of the reasons I hear people say they want to do that is because they want people to be more collaborative and get more innovative ideas, right? They don't feel like they're getting enough of those types of things. To me, I think this is where leaders have an opportunity to, where do you need to build community and where do you need to have, collaboration, and where do you need to do these things? And do you need to mandate that? Or is that just about being more intentional about when you do need to bring people together versus mandating people to have to be in offices? But I think all of this requires us to shift our ways of thinking, right? About teams and organizations. And all a team is a collection of individuals. So why we have to look at the collective, energy of the team, the collective mindset of the team, and then what does my team need right now? So if my team needs daily pep talks, they're going to get daily pep talks. when things are steady state and they're super busy, they probably don't want a daily pep talk. So then change that. What do they need at that time? Right. So I think, I don't know, I see a lot of teams get into ruts where we have this meeting and it's always been that way. And we always go to this meeting and we don't really know why we're here. And they're in these rhythms, and then they're not having the kinds of conversations that they should be having. And I just think confidence is one of those things that gets undermined very quickly when communication isn't working effectively within a group of people.
Mm-hmm.
So we constantly have to be recalibrating, which if you're a leader who likes to set it and forget it and just move on with getting the job done, it's going to feel like a lot of work for you. But guess what? Leadership is a lot of work. Team leadership is a lot of work.
Yes. And what you're also pointing out is it's also creative and intuitive.
Yep.
And emotionally intelligent.
Yes.
I love your idea of needing to recalibrate and sensing when times are asking for a different model and experimenting. It is all an experiment. I mean, it's not like there's any one process or method that's going to work for every team, everywhere, all the time.
No.
So it is about designing experiences, designing group experiences, what I'm hearing you say,
Yeah.
that allow people to be working at their best and getting what they need on a psychological, motivational level.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that you make me think of, Linda, is that, I think when it comes to when you have the privilege of leading a team, you also have a huge responsibility to do a lot of inner work and to know yourself, to know your triggers, to know your biases. And I think, we have a research partner and they've done a lot of research on leaders and leadership behaviors and the kinds of, leadership behaviors that allow people to be successful. And there's so many books that talk about like EQ, as you've talked about. And I think about on the simplest terms as leaders, what do we have to do? We have to deliver results and we have to care about people. And the research shows continuously that most leaders tend to lean in one or the other direction. So some of us intuitively know that our team needs this. They need the happy hour. They need the extra boost. They need all of those things. Others of us go, well, business isn't doing well right now, and I don't care what they need. We got to drive results or we won't even be here. And I think you need to really know and understand what side of the scale do you tend to lean towards, number one, as a leader. And then you're going to have to be very intentional about bringing balance, because that's what it's really about. Like, one is a strength. The other is, if you could bring some balance to it, how much more effective would you be? And I think about, I'm a bit of when I worked for other people, and I led sales teams before. And, I think sales teams are a unique animal, because once you get behind a number, there's a lot of pressure. It's easy. I always feel like once salespeople lose their mojo, it's tough to get it back. And I think sometimes, as leaders, you have to be courageous and brave enough to kind of create some buffer for your teams. If you don't, I was talking to a team a couple of weeks ago, and they're being given numbers. They don't buy into the numbers. They're concerned that their team are not going to buy into the numbers, and they're going to be coming out of the gate in January feeling already behind the 8 ball. And I think that's where, we have to help put things in perspective, help put sometimes we need to create smaller targets that, if you can get the team momentum, it'll get to that bigger target. But let's actually hide the big number for now. Instead, let's focus on some smaller things that we think will get there. But I think a lot of, if you're a leader that's just like, no, results, and you're not really thinking about the motivational side of people, and you don't have those insights, if that's not what comes naturally to you, you could find yourself at a deficit when you're in a turnaround position, when you're you might get some short-term by leaning on people, but over the long term, the toll that might take could cause other issues for you down the road. Burnout, turnover, all of those things that come with a hard driving, results oriented style, right? So I think that, we've got, I think if we want to retain confidence on our team, we're always looking at two sides of that sheet. Like if we don't have the productivity numbers and people are feeling discouraged by that because we've got people on the team that aren't delivering, but because we're so nice, we're letting it slide. That affects the confidence of the team, right? That's the other side of that equation. So I don't know. I think for most team leaders, we struggle with keeping the balance right on both. And we have to be very intentional.
Yeah. So what we've been it seems like we're moving back into like the dynamics within the team as well, and the factors,
Mm,
what like the factors that contribute that are with uneven numbers or uneven contribution. Like as a leader, what can be how can we foster a supportive environment
mm,
that encourages some members to take risks, the same kind of risks as other members or
yeah. So a couple of things. So I think fundamentally with teams, you have to have the basics in place. And to me, the basics are, first of all, your team is really clear on their purpose. They know the role they play in the business. Um, they're clear on their ways of working. So if taking risk is one of the things that's really important within this team, you all need to be aligned on what that looks like, because if I have a very high tolerance for risk and you have a very low tolerance for risk, you might think you're taking a big risk and I might think, gosh, Linda, like lean out a bit more, right? So we have to, I think there's so much value in teams really being clear on what we expect of each other. And when we say we want to be an innovative team, what do we mean by that exactly? Right? So first we've got to get the foundation in place, and then we have to be consistent with that. We have to be really consistent. Then from there, if you've got that foundation, and we all know that part of being on this team is that we're always pushing the envelope out a bit, you're going to be expected to contribute new ideas and new ways of doing things, that kind of thing. Then we have to do things like normalize failure, right? We've got to be doing things like holding after action reviews, talking about what did we learn from this. Jim Collins in his book Good to Great has the phrase, which people don't like, but I love it. It's called the autopsy without blood, meaning that you're not there to blame people and punch them out for making a mistake, but instead you say, gosh, how could we have done this differently? And you create that continuous learning culture. And I think the other part of it for me that helps on this is, we're a big proponent of feed forward in our organization. So we do it with individuals that we coach, but we do it with teams. So as a team, if we could do more of something, what would that be that would help us be more effective? And as a team, if we also say, yeah, you know what, collectively, we don't really learn from our mistakes very well. Okay, so what are we going to do differently about that? Those are like a couple of things that do that. And then celebrate the learning, like, often in organizations, I'll see the people that get the accolades or the people that knocked it out of the park and delivered the big business result. People who maybe though didn't meet the mark, but there was a lot of learning. Maybe it's not going to pay off now, but it will in the future. How are we calling that out? So those are sort of three things that come to mind, right? You got to normalize, get the foundation in place, but then normalize failure as learning, create that continuous learning culture, practice continuous learning as a team, and then celebrate, make sure you're rewarding and recognizing those celebrations. So very fundamental, but it's amazing how few teams have that embedded and are consistent about it. And then
Mhm.
whatever you want to do, I mean, we're on the topic. I mean, we could pick any topic, but you know, I remember working with a team once where their big thing was innovation. And the year before, they'd had a guy who really he was very innovative, in a culture that honestly, if it was a scale of like 1 to 90, where 90 is like, I'm a super innovative person, and 1 is I'm not all that innovative, he was a 90. The culture was about a 10, right? Even
Mm.
though they used the word innovation, they didn't actually want it. So he ended up not being successful there and ended up being exited. And so, a year later, when you're pulling the team together, say, we need to have more innovative ideas. Everybody's going, okay, but my experience and what I saw happen to that guy, why would I want to be innovative? And that lack of sort of connecting the dots between, the experiences we have when we're in an organization and when we join a team lead us to believe certain things about that team, which will drive our actions. And that's ultimately going to get us to the result. So, we always start, I find, in conversations with teams and leaders, they always talk about what they're not getting, like what we're not seeing, what are the results we're not seeing. But if you start stepping back down that ladder to say, well, why do you think that's happening? What are the belief systems that maybe exist in an organization? And I pick on innovation because it's one that usually people don't define well. And then they don't recognize where maybe they've been unintentionally shutting down innovation because they didn't really know what it was that they were actually looking for. So hence why you need to have ways of working that are really clear on what do we mean by being innovative or being collaborative or being strategic, or like you name the behavior, we need to define it explicitly and then be able to measure it, set goals around it, celebrate when we get there, learn when we don't. And then that builds the team's confidence because they say, okay, I see how it works around here and we're being consistent on this.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you'll often see a ripple in organizations when a new CEO comes in, because they might align to, because especially in big companies where we have, ways of working, like, values that have been in place and this person's been with the company forever and now they're the CEO. But the thing is, if you rank order values differently, it feels and looks differently. So if I'm a CEO that values innovation and you come in after me and you're a CEO that values productivity, even though productivity and innovation are two of our core values, but if you put more emphasis on productivity, that is going to feel very different in the organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be, we just have to be as teams really clear on what's the direction we're pulling in and how does that then trickle down into me as an individual, where are my biases, where do I need to contribute, maybe where I need to be more intentional, but better understanding of where we all are as a team together around some of these bigger ways of working.
Mm-hmm. And does the responsibility for that, do you believe, comes from the leader, or can it be shared among the team members?
I feel like the team leader is a team member who has a certain role around things within a team. Everybody brings their strength. Everybody brings their, strengths, biases, ways of working. I think as team leader, ultimately, what's your accountability, right? What are you accountable for? But I think the responsibility of a team's health, a team's confidence, I think that's a shared responsibility. I think you can, if you're a team member, you can contribute to your team being a great place to work, or you could do the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
So
I love the example that you brought of the team of that wanted innovation, and one
yeah,
individual was like way out there,
yeah.
like really taking it seriously. Like, yeah, this is what has been asked of me. Like, how do you feel like there's any way that that discrepancy within a team can come together? Like, would there have been a way other than exiting this person to benefit the team as a whole, do you think?
Absolutely think so. I mean, I would question if that person was the right hire because they were so innovative and this
Mhm,
company didn't want that. So I think if I could wave a magic wand, I would say to every executive team, be really clear on the behaviors that you're really expecting and really define them, because the problem is they stop at the surface and people choose sexy words, or they say we need to be innovative, and then they kind of stop there and they don't go into, well, what does that actually look like around here? What are people saying? What are people doing? So was that person the right fit for the culture? I don't know, but let's pretend they were. They were a team that really had not, that I think when anybody's an outlier outside of the team, I find organizations are a bit like, I'm not a big Star Trek person, but I think about the Borg, where like the Borg, just like they suck everybody into the one way of being, right? And that is the default for organizations. They will expel the interloper. They just will. So if you're saying, no, 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 we really need this interloper, like we need this more innovative person coming in, then you have to create systems within the team to make sure those voices are heard, make sure people are being open-minded to it. And so a lot of these things where this is where I have a beef with like self-assessments that don't go further than just being a self-assessment. Like, it's one thing to know yourself, but then to know how that affects the working relationships and those around you and how do we get better, that's where the real power is. And so now if I know that you're my one lone voice that's bringing this to the table, and let's face it, as team leader, I hold a lot of the power card. It is up to me to make sure that I am creating space for your voice within the team, and that if my bias is not to want to do those changes, and yet I know my business needs it or my team needs it, I have to be willing to listen, right? And I have to be able to create space for that individual. So it's a lot of, I find it's a lot of moving parts, but it's a lot of that intention of that team leader to really help that individual be successful if they're coming into a culture which is going to fight against that new way of thinking, right? And that's where you see, like, when organizations are going through change, a big change with, new leadership coming in or having to adapt to a market. That's why change can be difficult, because we have our ways of working and we have our ways of being. And a lot of times what used to work for us and what we liked about the team we worked in or the company we work for, we're not that willing to want to shift. So it requires sometimes an outside force to make that happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that, I mean, I would like to see that whether it's an individual or a team, that there is an openness to growth and building skills and bringing in the people that are going to help you make those change. So I hope that people will listen to this and think about, either hiring you or reading your book or bringing someone who does your type of work to help make those kinds of structures and awarenesses so that teams can operate at their very, very best, that they do have that space where everybody has a voice at the table, where people are listened to with respect
Mhm.
and not just like the ants knocking things off. I mean, if that's fun for people, I'm not going to knock that.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
If
Well,
everybody
I
is
think
into
that's another of those biases, right? Like, I think
right,
I'm an idea ant. Like, I could come up with a million ideas very quickly all the time. And so you don't like my ideas and you shoot them down. That's okay. I got more. It's not bothering me. And so I think it's just knowing, like, again, I go back to the biggest, most powerful thing we can all do for ourselves is to get to know ourselves better. It's to understand our strengths and what makes us so special and so talented, and then the corresponding shadow that's going to go with that strength, because there's definitely one, maybe two or three. I feel like I've got a long list of my shadows, right? That I'm constantly trying to be more intentional about managing. We all have that. I think the thing that we neglect a lot is then taking that into, then what does that mean when all of us individually with our strengths and with our shadows come together, and what does that dynamic create, and how do we be intentional about investing in the health of the team, just like you would invest in your own health by working out every day, or like working out, drinking water, eating right, getting sleep. If we layer that onto a team, what do we do? Like, we're always on teams talking about the business results and what we have to drive and those numbers. And how are we investing in the health of their team? If you tell me that you just do a 1-day offsite once a year where people get together and maybe go out for dinner with each other, or you have your Christmas party, that is not enough. That is not enough. You should be doing something on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual basis that is purely around building the team's health. And that's where you have the basis of confidence, because the team that's had all those investments made in it is going to be able to weather a lot of storms, is going to be a confident team because they have confidence in each other. They have confidence in the leadership, and they have that bond and strength, which allows them to go through the, the various storms that are inevitable today.
Yes, yes, I love that idea of we need to build our connections person to person and not just the work relationship to work relationship.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, how can people get in touch with you? We've got Go Roundtable. Is this your
Yeah,
website?
goroundtable.com is our website address. The company is The Roundtable because I refuse to pay exorbitant fees to the person who's sitting on that domain name. So The Roundtable, goroundtable.com is the website, though, and you can always find me on LinkedIn. I don't know that there's that many Glains, so spell it Glain, and you can find me, and I'm always happy to link in with people and have conversations about this kind of work.
It's been so fun to hear all of your ideas. My mind feels expanded, and I hopefully will get to expand our chat in the future.
I would love that. It was great talking to you, Linda.
So long, Glenn.